Hi, my name is Jim Hilborn,
And I'm Tom Dinas.
and we are the Small Business Doctors.
And I've been taking care of business every day. Taking care of business every way. I've been taking care of business. It's all mine. Taking care of business and working overtime.
Hey Tom, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Jim Hilborn, Tom Dinas, the Small Business Doctors. I think we decided we would talk about commercial real estate leases if you were retail.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm not well
Oops.
prepared.
Maybe we won't. I guess I'll be talking about commercial. No.
I'll help wherever I
Okay,
can
okay.
on this one.
Well, a commercial real estate lease, first of all, is a lease of real property. It's considered to be an ownership interest in real property. A lease is an interest in real property. It can be recorded. So when you are negotiating a commercial lease, then I suppose I said retail owners, but really any business that needs the property of another to do business. That includes repair bays and any kind of businesses. They're everywhere and anywhere. And so when you go into business and you decide that you need a space, but you don't own a space, then you're probably going to end up with a commercial lease. And so one of the things that you're going to talk about, and Tom, you can help me just jump right in here, is when you start, you need to think about how big a space you need. How many square feet?
Yeah, and that's sometimes difficult if you have a new business. If you have an existing one and you're moving from a location where you have an experience model that you're working from, it's definitely a lot easier because you've run into the space limitations, or you realize, what am I doing in this huge place? I can move everything into the front third of it, type thing. But actually going out, and actually one of the things I've thought is always works the best is you get, graph paper, laid it out, and then you take things like your equipment and your production lines and stuff and storage facilities, and you cut out scale pieces of paper, and then you start setting it on the actual piece of paper and kind of look and see how that's going to look, and then practice things like, well, I've got 36 inches between machine A and machine B. Is that enough for one person or two people to be working side by side on these pieces of equipment?
Exactly.
So a lot of forethought can go into this that will save you incredible amounts of frustration and money down the road.
Oh yeah, you have to have enough room, but if you don't have enough room, then it's terrible. And if you have too much room, you're going to be paying a lot of money for something you don't need.
Yeah.
Now, my experience has been in the retail business, and that's interesting. In the retail stores, if you'll look at maybe a model off of a store that you like or you've seen before, or you go in and now you're really looking at them, and you'll notice how that they use that display cases, and then they have aisles between the display cases. Underneath those display cases, generally storage. They're using the walls. They have what we call slat walls, and they have things for shelves everywhere.
Hanging from the ceiling?
Hanging
Yep.
stuff from the ceiling. And you'll notice that very little of that space that you see will be storage. And usually they store what they can in the back room, but those back rooms are as small as possible because they want as much of their inventory out to be purchased as possible.
Right. And also, all the leases I've ever encountered is based on square footage.
Absolutely.
And they don't differentiate between what you're using for storage and what you're using for display.
They don't. That's exactly right.
And so as I try to impress upon my clients, you have to make every square foot produce for you. That's all your space is an asset. And if that asset isn't generating revenues for you, then you have to do something about it. You got to change your product line, you got to redisplay things, but you need to go and look at every bit of space. Sometimes people say, well, I'll put this up here because it'll look really cute and stuff. Baloney. If it's not selling product, get it out of there.
And
I'm
you
very
know,
mercenary, but you know,
no,
that's
absolutely.
what it's all
and,
about.
And retail stores, particularly the little retail stores, the big ones have their own model, but the little ones, you know, even the artwork on the walls are for sale.
Right.
And you'll notice they have very few windows usually in those places. That's because they need that window space to hang stuff, to display items. So you're going to pay for a commercial lease with square footage. Now the other thing is you need to decide. Obviously, if you're in the industrial world, you don't need walk-by traffic. Don't need it. Don't want it.
Right.
You know, if you're in the retail business, it's going to make a big difference to you how many people walk by there. Because unless you have the kind of business, that kind of, you know, boutique where people travel from across town to get to you because you sell the only one in town. But you know, if you're selling the usual stuff, you know, you want people walking by it, easily visible, good places to park. Any of these things will make you suffer.
Yeah.
If people can't get out of their cars and get to you.
You know, and I remember a couple of clients I've had, they've gotten in really odd places where, you know, people went in and developed, you know, what would be like a flag lot type thing, and, you know, and I told them not to do it.
Exactly.
And they said, well, you know, it's a good space, it's a good price, and I said,
Good, cheap, yeah,
I said,
sure.
But the problem is, people develop traffic patterns. They go from this point to this point to this point, and if you're over here, and there's something like person to want to change his normal traffic patterns. People are creatures of habit. You know,
Oh.
I'm just the same.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely, and particularly if you're not buying something that you absolutely need to exist on, then if it's a discretionary purchase, and then it's going to be at a place that probably your average purchaser is going to go to a place where it's easy to go, easy to get, and pretty much on a path. They don't have to go too far out of their way to get there. And so, and you know, it's not saying that they wouldn't, but anytime you want to make it's easy for your customers, and that's what you really want to do, is make things really easy for your customers, always. So the square footage is going to be based, a lot of times it's going to be, if the, you know, the nicer malls and places where that's what they're selling, is all those people that walk by. You'll notice that the big malls have what they call their anchor tenants. You know, in the retail malls, it'll be like a Macy's or a Nordstrom's or the big department store and they'll be on one end or the other, and they'll be the biggest store in the place, and they'll get the best deal
Right.
on their square footage. But that's okay, because if your store's next to them, and that mall's going to be full at some point, people walking by your store.
Interesting enough, I saw one study, because I knew the guy who was doing the analysis of the loan to the shopping mall, and the most profitable per square foot operation in the whole place, the little kiosk.
I was going to say,
like just little, I think it was bracelets and stuff. Just
out
little,
in the actual walking middle of the middle.
that was by far and away the highest per square foot sale in the whole mall, I should say.
And in the retail, and again, in the retail business, and that is exactly how many stores that's how they manage them, and they talk about profitability per square foot. You know, and big stores do that. They talk about their profitability per square foot,
Oh, wow.
because that's what they're renting these things per square foot, and so it has.
That's the thing I've tried to drive home always to the client, that each square foot, you know, is that asset that needs to work for you.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, and and so, well, now you kind of think about what you want, and so now you know that you're going to, and don't just jump into this. These are incredibly big decisions where you're going to be.
And also, always remember that if you mess up, moving is going to be one of the most expensive things you'll encounter in your business.
Well, that's right, and you know, I kind of say the landlord owns you once you're there. That's not necessarily true. That's, in fact, I'm gonna back off that and argue the other side of that in just a second. But it will seem like that because you have moved in there. Now your customer base that you're developing knows where you are. They're coming if they like your stuff, and if they don't, you know, it's just a matter of time till you got a business.
Yeah.
But, so assume that you've got a saleable product and they know where you are. I think that most stuff I've read says when you move, you're going to lose 20-30% of your business. Boom.
Could very well be. All right.
Because they won't find their way back to you. And so
Or you're in a different traffic pattern.
you're in a different traffic pattern. And lots of reasons they won't come back, but a lot of times they don't. Now, you'll develop new customers as well, but you know, do you really want to hit your income? No, you don't.
Yeah.
And
You're going to have to shut down. You're going to have to move. It's going to take time to move from that location to the new location.
Right.
And start up again. Reset up your store. The
Yeah.
bigger store, the more downtime you're going to have, unless you throw a lot of labor at it. And
Yeah,
that's going to be a lot of expense.
Exactly. Now, you shouldn't be afraid to move if it's the right business decision. But the other part of that is that, so once you found the right place and the right thing, now how do you negotiate this lease? Well, a commercial lease is a contract. And it is enforceable, and just as any other contract would, is a promise that you're going to make, and the landlord makes certain promises. What you're going to get and is probably just an empty shell. Something else. A lot of times people don't know this. If you've done it before, you know it. If you haven't done it before, it's going to, that means all of the shelves and the brackets and the display tables and the cash registers and the counters and stuff, it's all on you. Every bit of it.
Modifications of electrical work, or if you're putting in compressors, drywall and partitions and whatever.
Office, a lot of times you just get that completely open space. You're going to put in a back room for storage. You're going to put in a little office. You're going to make it. You're going to build it yourself.
A lot of people say, well, yeah, but at least it's all deductible. But some of it isn't expense. If it's a major improvement, you're going to have to depreciate it over 39 years.
Well, yeah.
You know,
And who needs deductions? I need
cash.
income. Yeah.
I've always had more deductions than I needed, and never enough cash.
Right. The old joke about the 99th percentile tax bracket, just fine. I mean, making $1 million a year. But so it's going to be that you're going to have to build out. That's when you build out and anything. So if you come into a place and you see some improvements, maybe the back room's already in there, the little office is already in there, maybe some shelves are already there. The last tenant paid for that. The landlord didn't pay for it. And anything you build in that space will be yours. And many leases require that you put that space back in exactly the same condition as you found it. They don't want your little back room there. They don't want your little office there. They don't want your little display cases there that you would want to take anyway. But
now, part of the negotiation process also is know this place you're moving into.
Right.
Know its history. How long has that space been open? Because sometimes professional landlords are very open to negotiation. And because they don't like empty spaces.
No.
It's bad for the malls, bad for the image,
Right.
And so a lot of times you can get negotiations on rent because you have to put in so much in improvements. And so you can sometimes, everything is negotiable, and you just don't go in there and say, this is what I have to do. My mama says all they can say is no.
Well,
yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so everything is negotiable, and the other ways. So any negotiation, and this is true for anything in the world, I think, is that the more you know, the better you're going to be able to negotiate a contract price.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, and so the question will be, how much are other retail stores in the same situation as I am paying for their square footage, and what kind of walk by do they get? There's probably some numbers. What kind of walk by do you get? And if it's not good numbers, and maybe they don't have the numbers, but if it's not good numbers, they don't want you to know. I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people though. A lot of people look at the other stores. See how many vacancies there are in that mall.
Talk to the owners.
Talk to the owners of the stores.
They will give you an earful.
That's right. Once you move in and you're a fellow tenant, you're on the same team.
Right.
And the landlord is not necessarily your friend. He's not necessarily your enemy either, but he's not necessarily your friend. He has an economic interest in getting as much rent out of the buildings as he can. You have an economic interest in paying as little as possible. And the less you pay, the more you put in your pocket. So find out what you can about what other people, and those, a lot of times, you can even call up commercial real estate agents, and they will tell you what kind of retail spaces have you got, and what are they charging per square foot.
And they'll offer to negotiate for a fee for you too.
They will. There are those people who do it, and sometimes it's not a bad idea because they know exactly how much everybody else is paying.
Yeah,
So-
not only that, you have changing situations, changing demographics of the area. You have the changing of the economy,
All these things, and it's better to have a tenant in there. They might not want a long-term lease, but it's better to have a tenant in there than no tenant for
Right.
just all kinds of reasons. Yeah. And again, when your lease comes up for renewal, say that you're doing well and you want to do that, well, you can bet that the landlord probably wants a little more money. That's just the nature of the game. Why shouldn't you pay more money? Well, you have to have reasons. You can't, because he's going to sit down and he's going to want more money, and you're going to want to say, well, I could if I've calculated it out. There's another space here, there's another space there. Just because I'm plunked down here and I've built this business here, I don't want to move. But you're not going to be able to get anybody else to pay any more than X cents per square foot or dollars per square foot.
Yeah. You need to do your homework because
You
the
do.
landlord has all the ammunition.
He does.
He's living it day in and day out, and he's going to be able to throw stuff back at you. Go about this and this and this. It cost me this much to put it together, and so sometimes it'll make you feel fairly intimidated during the process.
That's right, and you feel as if you don't have a negotiating position because, well, the landlord is, he's probably a rich guy and he owns the building but he's got a heck of a nut to pay every month too. Let me tell you, it doesn't matter how rich you are. When you think you got a mortgage payment, you wait till you see his. So he's pretty interested in your contribution toward that monthly obligation that he has. So anyway, we were talking about that. Now, if you can shake hands on these things, and one of the things that you'll want to enter into, you will enter into a lease.
Right.
And it will be a lease probably that the landlord gives you. The landlord wants everybody to sign the same lease. He's familiar with it. His property management folks are familiar with it. They don't want to remake a lease every time they do any business. I understand that. That makes sense. So, but when you're looking at this lease, you're going to want to look at the provisions of this lease very, very carefully. Don't make the mistake
there could be
of.
some real eye openers in there.
Oh, there sure can be.
Common fees,
Oh.
property taxes.
Exactly. What else are you going to be expected to pay other than rent? And as Tom says, the common fees. Common fees, or those areas of the mall or the store complex or whatever. Sometimes it includes the driveway. Sometimes it has little park areas or little fountains or this sort of thing. And
Bathrooms.
Bathrooms,
Yeah.
common bathrooms for the public, and the landlord may very well be charging the tenants as a whole for a contribution to keep all that up. The common areas, and then we talked about. Property taxes. Look at that lease that the landlord may, you've heard of this triple net lease. That means they get their money for the lease, then they get money for the taxes, then they get money for the property tax, then they get money for the upkeep, then they get money for the insurance. And so, they
And
want
also,
you-
what are your insurance requirements? Because they're going to make mandatory insurance requirements on what you carry in that store for yourself.
Absolutely, there certainly will be, and you can count on it being in that lease. Now, so we get to there's going to be some lease insurance provisions there. You want to look at those. What kind of maintenance do you have to do? I mean, you're going to keep your store up, but what exactly does that maintenance provision say? Also, who is going to be responsible and if it leaks? It's very common for landlords to be responsible for the outer shell of the business and for the tenant to be responsible for anything on the inside. That's fairly common.
Yeah.
Is that what's in your lease? I don't know.
What happens if your neighbor gets on fire and you have smoke damage?
Exactly.
Those types of things.
Exactly. So who's going to pay for that? Yeah. Does the mall or what the complex need security? Who pays for that? Because your argument is to the landlord, of course. Well, of course, that's why I'm paying you X cents per square foot. Is that this is what you're providing me? This is it. So you've got this lease. You're looking at these provisions. The other thing is. What does it say? Now, suppose that indeed you do want to leave for whatever purpose. It may be because you're doing well, or it may be you're not doing well. But how are you getting out of this thing?
Ooh, very difficult sometimes.
Yeah, you've got a 5-year lease, and most landlords are going to want a multi-year lease. They don't want you in there for 6 months or a year and gone. They want their mall to look nice. They want long-term tenants. So. What does it say about you transferring your lease to another person? What we call an assignment or a sublease. Can you sublease? Can you assign? Those are actually two different legal terms. The subleasee sort of becomes your tenant, and you still owe the landlord the rent every month, if that's allowed. An assignment means that the landlord agrees that someone else will step into your shoes and be the new tenant. Of course, you're not off the hook, most likely. So if you're going to negotiate these things, though, you're going to want to negotiate a way that you're going to be able to walk out. And if you've got an assignee, a new person that's going to be paying the rent every month, how do you know that they're paying the rent every month? You've got to keep your finger in that. I've had people that have, 6 months after the assignee quit paying rent, and the landlord kicks them out, and then turns around and said, "Well, you owe me a year's rent," or 6 months or 7 months rent, and they're going, "Well, I didn't even know the guy had paid." How would I know? Well,
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that even though you might have a corporation or a limited liability company, these are professionally written leases, and they're going to require personal guarantees to them.
most likely they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, they.
And so you're on the hook for it ever unless you file bankruptcy later.
Well, that's right. That's right. And it doesn't take very much at
$3,000-4,000 a
Don't,
month.
yeah, for a year or two left on your lease to ruin your day when you start adding up those numbers. So, now, assuming, let's see, I want to talk a little bit about, because we don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk a little bit about what happens in a commercial lease situation when the rent has not been paid, or if anything else that is part of that lease, the maintenance, the insurance, this or that or the other has not been paid. If the rent has not been paid, what can your landlord do? Well, first, every state is probably going to be a little different about this, but every state is probably going to make a distinction between a commercial tenancy and a residential tenancy. Every state is going to be a little more, that I know of, is going to be a lot more protective of people's bedrooms than they are where they work. They're not going to let the landlord just come in and kick you out, usually in a residential situation, put your wife and kids out on the street. That's not what usually happens. That'd be, certainly every state I'm aware of, it's a long involved process to get rid of a residential tenant. A commercial tenant, on the other hand, again, depending on the jurisdiction, there is not nearly as much protection for the tenant.
I signed one lease. They actually had a clause in there that said that they were allowed to come in and physically remove me.
And you know what? They can in a
I
lot
was
of
like,
places.
what is this? Wyatt Earp's going to walk in, and draw down on me and send me on my way?
No, that's not what they do. What they do is they wait until you leave the premises and they come around and they change the locks on the door. That's what they do.
Sneaky buggers.
They are sneaky. I teach them how to be sneaky.
Oh, you're the one.
I'm the guy, but then usually in a commercial lease situation, there is two different. Obviously, if a landlord, if they came to my office, I would say, let's go through the courts. Let's make it clean. I don't want to take any. You don't want a breach of the peace. You don't want anybody getting in a fist fight. But they don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if they come around and do what's called a commercial FED self-help, which is forcibly making you leave. But they do. They come around at night and change the locks is what they do. Or if they go through the courts and kick you out and have a court order, guess what? They have a landlord's lien against everything in that store.
Oops.
Yeah, all of your inventory, all of your commercial shelving and your displays and your cash registers, all that stuff, the landlord's got a lien against.
That could make it unpleasant.
Well, very, very unpleasant. The landlord, and probably the landlord doesn't want that stuff. I mean, he probably doesn't, but he wants you to pay him his rent.
Right.
And so he's got this wonderful negotiating tool to either sell to you or to someone else. And you can imagine, that's where...
So he can shut you down, sell off your stuff,
Yeah.
pay the rent, and give you the difference if anything's left.
Yeah, and I've never seen any difference. So,
Wow, what a statistical oddity that is.
I know. It turns out that you can sell that stuff. Actually, usually that you can't sell that stuff for what's owed, but when you can, there's no incentive for the landlord to dispose of your goods for any more money than he's owed. Mm-hmm. He has the obligation to treat his tenants in good faith, to act honestly, but that leaves a whole lot of room. That doesn't mean he has to hold on to the store and can't take the first good offer, which turns out to be what's owed against it or close to it.
Yeah.
And in fact, you still owe him after he sells the stuff. You still owe him for whatever the difference is. So there's no incentive to hold out for the better price. The other thing is that once that happens, you really are out of business.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, when he shuts you down like that, and when your customers start coming up the door and find it locked, or
Not good for business.
or somebody else is in the store going, "Oh, go away, we're counting stuff here," you know. But anyway, so there, and then, but so typically, I just wanted to. I know we're about running out of time here, but if you are in a commercial lease and you are behind in the rent, as uncomfortable as it might be, it's very much in your interest to talk to the landlord
Yes.
every day.
Ostrich approach to problem solving will not get you through this.
Right. You have to go to the landlord and you need to explain to him your plan. You know, I know you're behind, I know I'm behind the rent, but here's how we're going to work our way out of it.
Right. And once again, he wants to keep a tenant in there, doesn't want that dislocation and the bad will that might come from it.
Right,
So
right.
Everybody has a vested interest to make it work.
Yeah, so at any rate, I hope we've talked a little bit about that. Obviously, there's lots to know, and you know, as we always say, you know, you need a lawyer and a financial consultant on your team, but you need to understand the process before you can make use of those folks. So keep coming back. We really appreciate you talking to us and good small business doctors. Now, there are some tax issues here that we haven't even. And we're not even.
I
gonna
mentioned
get a chance.
depreciation
Yeah,
once,
yeah.
but there's lots of other things that.
And we're just going to have to come back and do another show on that, I think, about the business depreciation for that. So didn't get there, we will get there. In the meantime, we'll see you next time on
Yes.
Small Business Doctors.
We are so cool.
We are.
I think we're gonna